Remember the smell of freshly baked bread at Steinberg's? Or the iconic yellow shopping carts at Dominion that were practically Canadian institutions? Join us on a journey through 8 vanished grocery chains that weren't just stores. They were the backdrop to our childhood memories, first jobs, and family traditions that shaped Canadian identity in ways we never realized until they disappeared. Coming in at number 8, Steinberg's wasn't just a grocery store. It was the backdrop to countless Canadian childhoods. Remember those distinctive yellow signs that seemed to glow like beacons on snowy Quebec evenings? Founded in 1917 by Hungarian immigrant Ida Steinberg in Montreal, this Quebec institution started as a tiny grocery stall and grew into an empire of 170 stores that defined how generations of families shopped. The distinctive crackle of the PA system, announcing specials in both official languages, the squeak of cartwheels against the polished floors, and that unmistakable aroma of fresh-baked bread from the in-store bakery, these sensory memories remain etched in the minds of Eastern Canadians decades after the last store closed its doors in 1992. Steinberg's wasn't just where you bought groceries, it was where communities gathered. Mothers exchanged recipes while waiting at the deli counter. Teenagers secured their first jobs stocking shelves or bagging groceries. And children learned the value of money as they carefully counted coins for penny candies. The jingle, "It's mainly because of the meat," wasn't just advertising. It was the soundtrack to Saturday morning shopping trips that became family traditions across Quebec and Ontario. When Steinberg's disappeared, a unique piece of Canadian retail culture vanished with it, marking the end of an era when grocery stores were extensions of our neighborhoods rather than corporate outposts. If you're feeling that warm rush of nostalgia washing over you right now, you're not alone. This journey through Canada's forgotten food aisles is just getting started, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Take a quick second to hit that subscribe button as we continue our countdown of the grocery chains that defined Canadian culture. Sliding into number 7, we find the distinctive red-branded Loeb Stores that once dominated Ontario and Quebec. Founded in 1912 by Moses Loeb as a modest wholesale grocery in Ottawa, this chain grew to become the heartbeat of communities across Eastern Canada. Remember those wide, gleaming aisles illuminated by fluorescent lights that made everything look just a little too bright? Or the way the automatic doors would whoosh open on cold winter days, greeting shoppers with a blast of warm air scented with freshly ground coffee? Loeb wasn't just a place to buy food, it was where cashiers knew your name and remembered your preferences. Paper or plastic? Wasn't just a question, but the opening line to weekly conversations about neighborhood happenings, hockey scores, and local politics. The store's slogan, "We give you our best," wasn't marketing hyperbole. It was a reflection of a time when personal service defined the Canadian shopping experience. Children of the 1970s and 80s might remember pressing their noses against the glass of the candy counter, or the thrill of being trusted to run down an aisle to grab a forgotten item while mom kept her place in the checkout line. When Loeb Stores began disappearing in the early 2000s, gradually absorbed into the Metro chain, more than just a grocery store faded away. A distinctly Canadian approach to retail, where relationships mattered as much as transactions, began its slow decline into the anonymity of modern shopping. Number 6 on our countdown brings us to Dominion, where that earworm jingle, "Mainly because of the meat," became permanently lodged in the Canadian consciousness. Founded in 1919, Dominion stores with their distinctive D logo weren't just places to shop. They were architectural landmarks in neighborhoods across Ontario. The red and white color scheme, those squeaky-wheeled shopping carts with the wobbly front wheel, and the rhythmic beeping of cash registers created a sensory landscape that defined weekly shopping for nearly a century of Canadian families. Dominion stores were where many Canadians first experienced the revolutionary concept of the supermarket, where previously separate errands to the butcher, baker, and greengrocer consolidated into a single weekly expedition. Remember those tiled floors that amplified every footstep? Or the distinctive sound of price stickers being punched out by managers doing daily markups and markdowns? For children of the 1970s, Dominion represented the thrilling possibility of convincing parents to purchase sugary cereals prominently displayed at eye level, or the coveted prize of being allowed to insert a quarter into the gumball machine strategically positioned near the exit. The cultural significance of Dominion extended beyond mere shopping. These stores were where Canadian food culture evolved in real time. It's where many families first encountered exotic imports like kiwi fruit or prepackaged convenience foods that transformed Canadian cooking. The Dominion Weekly Flyer wasn't just advertising, it was essential reading that determined what would appear on dinner tables across the province. When the last Dominion signs came down in 2008, replaced by Metro, a chapter of Canadian commercial heritage that had shaped family routines for generations closed permanently. Reaching the halfway point in our countdown at number 5, we find the warehouse-style revolution that was Miracle Food Mart. Those massive, no-frills stores with their bold red signage represented a dramatic shift in Canadian grocery culture during the recession-squeezed 1980s. Remember those concrete floors and industrial shelving that reached towards distant ceilings? Or the almost theatrical experience of watching butchers work behind glass in refrigerated rooms, their hands moving with practiced precision as they transformed sides of beef into neatly packaged portions. Founded in 1982, Miracle Food Mart brought American-style bulk shopping to Canadian suburbs, challenging the conventional wisdom about what a grocery store should be. The scale was unprecedented. Aisles wide enough for 2 carts to pass comfortably, packages sized for families rather than individuals, and parking lots vast enough to accommodate the growing suburban population. The sensory experience was distinctive. The perpetual chill of overactive air conditioning, the hollow acoustics that amplified announcements throughout the cavernous space, and the unforgettable sight of inventory stacked on pallets reaching toward distant ceilings. For Canadian families navigating the economic challenges of the era, these stores transformed weekly shopping from a chore into a treasure hunt for the best deals. Children might remember the distinctive red aprons worn by staff, or the unusual sight of forklifts operating in the same space as shoppers during restocking. When Miracle Food Mart was absorbed into the A&P family in the early 1990s, it marked not just a corporate transition, but the end of an experimental era in Canadian retail when bigger was better, and the weekly grocery shop became an event rather than an errand. Number 4 brings us to the legendary Nob Hill Farms, where grocery shopping transcended mere errands and became weekend entertainment for countless Canadian families. Those massive food terminals with their distinctive grain elevator symbols were architectural anomalies on the Canadian landscape. Industrial-scale retail palaces where the shopping carts were literally twice the size of those in ordinary supermarkets. Founded in 1953 by Steve Stavro, the grocery magnate who later owned the Toronto Maple Leafs, these cavernous warehouses redefined what grocery shopping could be for a generation of Canadians. The sensory experience of Nob Hill was unlike anything else in retail. The echoing acoustics that made every announcement sound like it was coming from the bottom of a well, the perpetual chill that required many shoppers to keep their coats on even in summer, and the unmistakable scent of cardboard and produce that mingled in the air. Remember those wooden pallets stacked with everything from canned goods to electronics? Or the railway-themed decor that featured actual railroad tracks running through some locations? The stores were deliberately utilitarian, yet there was something almost theatrical about their scale that made shopping feel like an adventure. For working-class families during the economic turbulence of the 1980s and 90s, Nob Hill Farms represented more than savings. It was financial survival wrapped in the dignity of abundance. Your father might disappear for 20 minutes into the legendary meat department, emerging triumphant with enough affordable protein to feed the family for weeks. Grandmothers who lived through wartime scarcity marveled at the sheer volume of food under one roof, often noting how Steve Stavro would have been a millionaire back in the old country with such inventory. When the last location closed in 2000, crushed between the emerging big box chains and traditional supermarkets, countless Canadian families lost not just a grocery store, but the Saturday ritual of going to Nob Hill that had structured their weekends for decades. Our number 3 spot belongs to the original IGA stores, not the franchise operation familiar today, but the independent grocers who formed the original Independent Grocers Alliance in 1926. These neighborhood markets with their distinctive red shield logos were the commercial backbone of small-town Canada, where the boundary between business and community blurred until nearly indistinguishable. Remember those wooden floors that announced your presence with creaks and specific spots known to every regular shopper? Or the narrow aisles that necessitated a delicate dance when 2 carts needed to pass each other? These weren't just places to buy food. They were social institutions where the owner lived just down the street and knew which families might need discreet credit when times were tight. The sensory memories remain vivid for many Canadians. The butcher's pencil tucked behind his ear, ready to jot special cutting instructions on white paper. The distinctive smell of sawdust sprinkled on floors in the meat section. The seasonal rhythm of produce displays that tracked local harvests rather than global supply chains. In countless small Canadian towns from Nova Scotia to British Columbia, IGA stores were where you'd run into your teacher buying ingredients for dinner, or where your grandparents would stop daily for just what they needed, refusing to embrace the modern notion of stocking up. When many independent IGA stores began closing in the 1980s and 90s, unable to compete with superstore economics, communities lost more than convenient access to groceries. They lost institutions where everyone really did know your name, where your high school job bagging groceries came with life lessons from the butcher who'd worked there for 30 years, and where local news traveled faster than the weekly flyer. Our runner-up at number 2 is Consumers Distributing, which, while not strictly a grocery chain, revolutionized Canadian retail in ways that still influence how we shop today. Founded in 1957 in Toronto, Consumers pioneered a retail model that seems simultaneously futuristic and archaic to modern sensibilities. A hybrid of catalog and in-person shopping, where products remained mysterious until they emerged from that magical back room. Remember those thick catalogs with their distinctive yellow covers that became dog-eared from repeated family consultations? Or the strange ritual of writing item numbers on those small slips of paper that served as your ticket to retail satisfaction? The sensory experience of Consumers was unique. The antiseptic brightness of showrooms featuring a single display item of each product, the distinctive sound of pneumatic tubes whooshing your order slip into the backroom labyrinth, and the palpable anticipation that built as you watch the conveyor belt that might or might not deliver your desired item. For countless Canadian families in the 1970s and 80s, Consumers was where you bought everything from small appliances to toys to jewelry at prices that seemed magically lower than department stores. The cultural significance of Consumers Distributing extended far beyond its innovative business model. This was where middle-class Canadian families accessed previously unattainable luxury goods, where children learned patience as they waited to see if their Christmas wish list items were in stock, and where the distinctive yellow shopping bags signaled to neighbors that you'd scored a deal worth discussing over backyard fences. When Consumers filed for bankruptcy in 1996, Canada lost not just a retailer, but a uniquely Canadian approach to shopping that somehow transformed scarcity and inconvenience into virtues that enhanced rather than diminished the excitement of purchase. And finally, standing triumphant at number 1, Woodward's Food Floor, the grocery experience that defines shopping for generations of Western Canadians. Founded in 1892 by Charles Woodward, the food floors of this iconic department store chain weren't merely places to buy groceries. They were weekly pilgrimages for families across British Columbia and Alberta, cultural institutions that structured time itself. Remember that towering W sign that once dominated the Vancouver skyline? Or the legendary Hotpoint 49-day jingle, 1.49-day Tuesday. That still triggers instant nostalgia in anyone who grew up within earshot of a radio in Western Canada. The sensory landscape of Woodward's food floor was unmistakable. The distinctive uniforms with starched collars worn by staff, the gentle background music interrupted by polite announcements, the aroma of fresh-baked goods that greeted shoppers as they descended the escalator toward food heaven. These weren't just grocery departments. They were culinary theaters where shoppers could sample exotic new products like pizza or TV dinners when they first appeared on Canadian shelves, where demonstration stations introduced generations of home cooks to new techniques and ingredients, and where the beloved mascots, Pumpkinhead the Bear and Woody the Woodward's Woodchuck, were as familiar to Western Canadian children as any cartoon character. Woodward's food floors represented a uniquely Canadian approach to retail that balanced quality with accessibility, tradition with innovation. These were spaces where multiple generations shopped side by side, where your grandmother insisted on getting her meat nowhere else because she'd been shopping there since before you were born, where families celebrated special occasions with treats from the distinctive bakery department, and where seasonal displays marked the rhythm of the Canadian year more reliably than any calendar. When the last Woodwards closed in 1993, it marked more than the end of a store. It was the closing chapter of a distinctly Canadian retail culture where quality, service, and community connection mattered more than convenience or price.